Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So let's take a look at an Alexis clip here. That was a great video. First, can we just give it up for that video? The production values alone. Amazing. Really good video. Really good video.
Awesome.
So what have you been finding?
Yeah, so the Misfit Economy as a project actually started out as a joke. And it started out as a joke that I thought was funny, that no one else thought was funny. So later, I'd love your opinions as to why this joke wasn't funny. But it started out, I was meeting a friend from The New Yorker who drew cartoons for The New Yorker. And I pitched him this idea, which was basically, I think you should draw these terrorists, these people from Al-Qaeda who want to hire McKinsey, the consultants, to figure out how they can offset the carbon from some of the bombings that they choose to do. And the reason, I then thought about it because he just stared at me and he didn't think this was remotely funny. And so I tried to explain to myself, like, why do I think this is funny and no one else finds this remotely funny? And partially, for me, why can't terrorists be environmentalists? These are people that we, within the media or within sort of public consciousness, we tend to see as others. We put them into boxes. A lot of stories about terrorists put them within this category of primitive. And so what I started looking at was this kind of innovation, was looking at all these people that we regard as others, as outliers, as misfits, and asking the question, what can they teach us about innovation? How are they innovating? How do they actually develop a lot of complex ideas and inventions that doesn't get covered? Because, you talk about violence and gangs, but you never talk about management practices and gangs. And so some of the most humanizing moments of the Misfit Economy has been learning these incredible stories with all these characters, some of which you saw in the video, and just feeling, both, one, super empathetic for those people and the lives that they're living and the kind of innovation they're pursuing, and blown away by the level of complexity that you can uncover in these informal systems. And in certain countries, the informal economy is around 70% of the economy. So these are really mainstream sources of, economic activity. And there were a few key examples that, I'll share with you that we focus on in the book. One was pirates. And tracing this historically from old school, our pirates, and looking at ways in which they developed self-governance, that they wrote constitutions that actually predated Western democratic constitutions. And so we began looking at these pirate principles and gradually then coming to modern day piracy and Somali pirates, and began documenting all these different kinds of stories. Some other interesting ones that have been sort of that have pushed me in different ways is thinking about something like the deep web. And so where you actually have these incredibly clandestine eBay-like networks for buying and selling just about anything online. So whether that's drugs, arms, all these different kinds of things, and thinking about how those transactions work.
What's the craziest thing you've seen for sale on deep web eBay? Because we have actual eBay here, so maybe they can learn something.
I mean, I just think the fact that you can actually trade arms, and not just like a gun, but legitimate like weapons on these sites is insane. And this is also interesting because it's something that was developed by the US government that then became taken over by these black market innovators. So they're, within this history of these misfits, there's always this play at work between, trying to out-innovate the system or trying to game the system in that way. And, talking to people, I think what's so interesting about this project is suddenly everyone wants to tell you their sketchiest moment that they've ever had. And a lot of people want to talk to me about prostitution, and I haven't found a way to work that into the book. But one thing you were really excited about was sex robots. So
wait. I'm not excited about sex robots. Just making that really clear.
Quote of the day. Blog it, Trisha. Tumble it.
Sorry.
Tumble it. Tumble it now.
I'm not gonna. No, I didn't mean to out. No.
It gets better.
No, but merely theoretically. Yeah, I mean, do prostitutes face market competition from sex robots? And that was something I started thinking about because I really didn't want to glamorize necessarily, prostitution or sex trafficking or all these different interesting sort of vice markets around sex. So began exploring with that. And it's interesting to see how a lot of elements of automation come to infect these markets. And so even Mexican drug cartels looking at ways they're diversifying into things like human trafficking, building mobile apps to actually to actually get people across borders so that they can figure out where police forces are. So there's all these really interesting ways in which misfits are harnessing technology while also not being part of our system. That's just been amazing for me, and it's pushed me as a person to really develop empathy and get out of these good and evil kind of plot structures that we grow up into.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm not asking you anything that I don't struggle with myself, but partially as a researcher who works with communities of alterity and partially as an activist, I really struggle with, so I study how subcultures keep secrets online, right? And then I'm super proud of myself as an ethnographer when I figure it out. And I'm like, oh shit, I can't publish this because the 10 people who are interested in this subculture and who read JSIS will then be like, I have the answers now. But there's a serious question there, again, both as a researcher and as an activist, of what do you do when you have these moments of innovation that might be someone's livelihood or might be someone's form of protest, and then opening that up to a wider audience. And I guess, how do you manage that?
Do you have ethics?
It's interesting, and I pieced this along because we were getting into a debate about objective journalism before, and I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel comfortable being a sort of disembodied researcher. A lot of the people that I end up meeting, I do try and, there are certain relationships that I do try and help bring opportunities into their life. The leader of the King Tones, for example, leader of the Latin Kings, former leader here in New York, King Tone, is someone that I've done a lot of interviews with and someone whose wisdom I greatly admire. And he's just written his memoirs, and we're trying to find ways of getting the publishing industry to respect his life and the different stories that he has to tell. And I meet other researchers who I think get far too entangled with their subjects. A lot of people in this field, some women I meet have more of a bad boy fetish kind of thing that draws them into this, and can be messy. And so I think it's just on a case-by-case basis. My drive with this book is to really harness the sets of principles rather than any one specific innovation or technology, is to say there are these 9 principles that I think these misfits are using that if we harness as a society can profoundly transform our experience of capitalism. And so that's what the book is exploring, and using some of these stories to do that rather than to just, tell someone how to order cocaine online.
But you also provide that, right?
You can ask me about that later.
What are some of these principles?
Yeah, so one...
It's a nice teaser, by the way.
Well, the book is partially written, so some of them are more thought out. But one that we talk about is self-governance. One that we talk about is the entourage effect. And what's really interested me is how success for a lot of these individuals is not individual. It's collective. And so when we talk about the entourage effect, is we're looking at different ways that communities are developing and progressing together. And we spoke actually about this phenomena with Troy Carter, who's Lady Gaga's manager, and he just had amazing things to say of growing up in Philly and the fact that those guys who have all made it out there, they worked as a unit. You know, they're all now, you know, in LA together, they're all now a big deal, but they're a big deal because of each other. And so looking at different ways in which people have been able to share that success. Other things that we're looking at is just the spirit of informality. So how to improvise. So much of our society and our market society is about standardization. It's process driven. And so we look specifically at principles that people are using that are how to get outside of that. You know, with the Occupy movement, what I thought was super interesting there is there were all these other expert organizers that were preparing for the exact same kind of Occupy moment. And they had these protest movements that never got off the ground, and it's because they were too heavily engineered. You know, they created all these frameworks about how movements happen, and they had all these ideas, and they didn't give space over to people to just do it. They were way too controlling about it, and I think that's this formalizing spirit that we need to sort of get out of our DNA if we're to be more successful.
Anybody else out there in comment land? Yes.
It's, I think, a follow-up question, which is, what is the relationship between the sort of stories and the information to capitalism? I mean, do you hope to make it a sort of more humane system? Is it so that entrepreneurs can better innovate? Will it feed back into these informal economies in a sort of positive way?
Yeah, I mean, so my hidden agenda with this book initially,
If you say this, it's not going to be hidden anymore. Just so you know how that works.
I don't know how public this is. No one's really tweeting. But it was like, okay, there are all these, people love the Robin Hood stories. So how do we actually use this voyeuristic impulse, everyone wants to know these Robin Hood stories, and begin to talk about an agenda of new economics or new principles that we can begin employing? And, you know, I went to new economic conferences, and I was speaking to, like, less than 1% of most people, and they all have this odd language. But some of those experiments, I got really excited about, things like time banking and gift economy and things that, you know, folks are trying out at a community level. And so that's what I began thinking about, is how do we all see ourselves as innovators? This idea that, you know, it's not the Edisons of the world who are innovators, but everyone is an innovator. And through citizen-based innovation, we can find ways of actually hacking our society's structures and working together to build out infrastructure. So that's hopefully the invitation that the book will provide.
Thank you very much.